Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Thursday morning's webinar. I'm Chloe Tetro. I am the head coach here with Ready Care, and for today, we're going to be looking at what are beliefs as part of a 4-week mini series that will investigate beliefs, what they are, how they tie into emotions, what is happening under the hood with regards to the brain processes involved in it, and how can we harness what we know about beliefs to positively influence our behaviors, actions, and bring us closer to our goals. So what are beliefs? Beliefs are the assumptions, the ideas, or convictions, excuse me, that an individual might hold to be true, whether or not they have evidence to back that. They are basically the framework for understanding and interpreting reality. They'll shape our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions. Beliefs can be conscious, we can know about them, or they can be unconscious, acting under the surface and driving our behaviors outside of our awareness. They can be rational, they can be irrational, and oftentimes they can be quite irrational, and they can change over time. So they're not entirely set, but there is a degree of looping back to things that we believe if we have evidence towards it. They can stem from personal experience, cultural context, so things that come in, things that influence our thought process and our belief systems. They can be brought about by upbringing, social influences, and they'll play a significant role in cognitive processes. So things like perception, learning, problem solving, decision making, stress management. In the background of neuroscience and psychology, when a person understands their beliefs, it helps them to understand their behaviors and their mental processes, and to make some course corrections where it's needed. Beliefs can also become self-fulfilling prophecies, which is something that we'll have a look at over the next few weeks. And what we believe can often impact our behaviors and outcomes. And why that is that the brain, as a mechanism, tends to predict rather than react, which sounds kind of counterintuitive because we think that we're constantly reacting to our environment. But actually, what's happening below the surface is that our behaviors are already predicated by the information that we believe. So we start to formulate our reaction to an event based on the similarity of that event to previous contexts. So our brain picks out, oh, this reminds me kind of a similar situation. So we start to behave in it, and then it adjusts. So it predicts, adjusts. It is a very dynamic process. There's lots of different cognitive functions and brain regions involved in it, and it's considered that belief formation starts with perception and information processing. So if we think of ourselves as very young babas with lots of potential, lots of information that we're trying to make sense of, the brain will start to interpret it and evaluate it, looking at things that are important, things that garnish an emotional response, things that make us happy, things that make us fearful, and it starts to prune away the information it doesn't really see as relevant. So the emotional responses are stored in the amygdala, and that will shape the belief formation, particularly when there's an emotional significance. So things like if we felt embarrassed as a child, the events that are tied and associated with that particular experiences will be tagged with a particular belief. An example that I give is if you spoke in class and all the kids started laughing, you could have tagged in with your amygdala that public speaking equals shame, public speaking equals being laughed at, being made to feel stupid. And as you move and progress through life, situations that remind you of that, that are associated with that and will trigger the association in the amygdala, will start to shape your behaviors according to it. So as you develop through life, you might find yourself going quiet at school, going quiet in social circles, and going quiet in work meetings. You'll start to develop what's known as limiting beliefs and limiting behaviors based on those beliefs that curb your ability to fully participate based on a specific event that the brain went, we are tagging this is not happening again, we hated that's not happening again. So there's an awful lot of cognitive processes, but they're quite formulaic. So something like CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, looks at identifying some of the key patterns that are involved in the brain and the belief formation, and looks at kind of untying that, unpicking that, and untangling that. So the behaviors, as I've said, are very, very much influenced by our belief systems. So the beliefs are the mental models, because that's essentially what they are. They're this lattice of constructed pathways in the brain that your system goes to most often, and they start to dictate how you view yourself, others, and the world around you. And your beliefs will shape the behaviors and actions that you take therein. They act as a cognitive filter. So there's loads and loads of information there, that filter through which we might perceive and interpret the world. If we believe something to be true, our behaviors will align with that belief. For instance, going back to that example of the public speaking child, you might find yourself avoiding situations that require it, and they can become self-fulfilling prophecies. So each time that you avoid that behavior, it reinforces that belief and that mental model that public speaking equals scary. Public speaking equals shameful, and you're giving yourself new evidence in each of these behaviors. So not all beliefs lead to direct behavioral changes. Some influence attitudes, biases, so things we believe about others and the world, and decision-making processes. So understanding and challenging these unhelpful and irrational beliefs is a key component of lots of lifestyle habit changing, lifestyle interventions, and it's key in, if we want to adopt a new behavior, really, really looking at the lens of the belief that we view that behavior through, the attitudes that we have, the emotions we have through it, and being able to go right to the root of our behavior, which is that belief, and unpicking it ever so slightly. So with belief systems, the main ones that I'm talking about here are what's known as core beliefs. They're the context. So they're the fundamental conviction that an individual can hold about themselves, others, and the world around them. And they're formed most often, but not always, very early in life, influenced by our experiences, our interactions, and our inherited beliefs. So if we're in a family that has a very particular beliefs about very particular context, we tend to adopt those just through osmosis, whether we mean to or not. They're typically ingrained and are what can exert the most influence on our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And very, very often, what you'll find with core beliefs is that they are identity based. Not always, but almost always. And that's why it can be so difficult to shake free of them, because our brain is a self-protective organ. So we view ourselves, anything that's associated with the statements I am is seen as an essential part of your identity. Your whole being has evolved to protect you. So if you view yourself as, I'll give you an example of a core belief, I am unlovable, right? And you can see how that could have impacts into your behaviors. The organism is trying to protect that I am, that identity that is formed within it. Now that's one component part of it. There can be other core beliefs that are more to do with the lens that we view others through. So for example, others are untrustworthy, the world is a dangerous place. They can really shape a person's overall perspective and decision making. So you can see that if somebody believes that at a core level, others are untrustworthy, for example. Other perceptions and other ideas of the world and others can start to stack on top of that. So really, it's getting to the root of it. They're quite resistant to change, core beliefs, because they're so ingrained in how we view the world and ourselves. But they're not totally immutable. there once the maladaptive core belief has been identified, there can be an allowing of the individual to develop more adaptive and balanced beliefs over time. And I think it's a very good idea as we move through our own lives to really take stock of what we believe about certain situations. And it's the ideal scenario when we're looking to make lifestyle and behavioral changes. So when we're in one particular state and hoping to get to, a more idealized state, it's a really, really good time to take a look at what it is that we believe about that state, that action, our capabilities around it. So there's a good few reasons why identifying core beliefs is crucial in our lives and through the lens of lifestyle and habit changes. So obviously we'll understand our behavior a little bit better, and the beliefs are strong indicators of behaviors. We can understand why it is that we act the way that we do. If, for example, I believe I'm bad at sport, I might avoid participating in them, which I have been very guilty of, very, very much guilty of. Whereas recognizing that I hold that belief and I'm putting barriers to enjoying particular experiences that I've shut away from because of that fundamental belief that I am absolutely rubbish at sports. It's good to see that, that's a very particular example, but it's more subtle ones can come into play. Another one that I've mentioned on previous ones is this idea that I've always thought I was bad with numbers, which was fine when I was at school. I could go, oh, I love English, I love art, I love all these different things. But as I grew, anything involving numbers became quite overwhelming to me. And the more I avoided them, the more I reinforced that belief that I'm uncomfortable around numbers. But of course, numbers also mean scheduling, budget sheets, lots of different core elements of being an adult. So yeah, being able to identify that was an inherited core belief from my environment when I grew up, or something that struck me very early in life as a difficult experience in school, and how that carried into my adult life. So another reason, I'm talking about myself now, another benefit in identifying core beliefs is being able to promote the change that, and open yourself up to experiences that you may have closed yourself off from. If a belief is causing harm and preventing personal growth, recognizing it is the first step towards change. Once a belief is identified, it can be evaluated, it can be challenged, and it can be potentially altered. It can help improve your mental health because of the degree of anxiety and stress that specific beliefs can cause us. And oftentimes a lot of our stresses and a lot of our anxiety can be really rooted back down to a core belief that we have about the situation or ourselves or our capabilities around managing it. Which is why the likes of cognitive behavioral therapy, which looks to dispel some of the emotional charge and the thought patterns we have around that belief, and given more adaptive beliefs instead, can really help to curb our experiences of that stress and anxiety. So it can also promote self-awareness, personal development. It can facilitate communication and understanding, which can improve communication and understanding between individuals, and allows people to understand where each other are coming from, potentially reducing conflict and misunderstanding, and help to give greater decision-making abilities when we have the clarity that we've kind of broken free from the shackles of, that inherited belief, that reinforced belief, and we're able as adults to make decisions based on the information that we have, the certitude of our own capabilities, the certitude of our own confidence, and evidence that we're well able to tackle things like the scenario, like the association of that context that the core belief emerged from. So that's a kind of look at the basics of belief. What we're going to do over the next few weeks is actually do a proper deep dive, because I'm trying to cover quite a bit in a very short amount of time today. But over the next few weeks, what we're going to be able to do is just take a chunk and really give more background, more context, more studies, more scenarios to explain what is happening on those levels. So looking ahead, next week, we're going to have a look at beliefs and their tie-in with emotion. And they're intrinsically connected. There we go. They guide our interpretation of events, which in turn evoke emotions. For instance, if we believe failure is unacceptable, we're total perfectionists, we might experience anxiety when we're faced with a challenging task. On the flip side, emotions can also shape our beliefs. So experiencing a strong emotion in a certain situation can form a solid belief about the situation or similar situations in the future. That interplay and that connection they have is a key area when we're looking to move from maladaptive emotional responses and their underlying belief systems. So understanding and modifying these beliefs can help to regulate our emotions as well, which will help improve our experience of our everyday. If we have a lowered stress response, if we have a lowered fear response, if we're able to go, okay, this scenario that I'm placing myself in any other time would have me absolutely up to 90. Whereas I've had a look at that and I can see public speaking in and of itself. I have lots of evidence that I'm very capable of it in different scenarios. I can see that maybe it's not the gigantic threat to my core being that I may have initially thought that it was. And I'm able to feed my brain and my entire being lots of evidence that, no, I'm well able, this is good, I'm capable. And all of a sudden, the emotional charge starts to go down. And our behavior, how we enter into the scenario, how we enter into the situation is exceedingly different. Our reactions are different. Our actions towards it are different, and how we conduct ourselves within it is exceedingly different, which impact the outcomes of that. After that, we're going to have a look at what's happening under the hood. And I love this stuff, as you can probably tell. It's really looking at the multiple brain regions and the mechanisms involved in belief systems. It's looking at the prefrontal cortex. It's looking at the amygdala. It's looking at the anterior cingulate cortex, all of the different parts that are involved in creating these mental models. And once we understand the mechanisms, once we have a really good picture, because we're in first person in our lives, we only see things through our awareness and our perception. But when we understand what's happening under the hood, it's a lot easier to be able to watch things happen from a more detached place and go, okay, that's what's happening here. I'm having a bit of a fear response because this reminds me of that thing. Thank you, brain, for trying to protect me. I can see that your mental models are firing hugely here. And thank you so much for trying to shield me from a maybe shameful experience. But actually, I'm good. I got this. I'm very good. And having that dialogue with the brain to try and appease some of the emotional pathways and understanding what's happening leads to a greater amount of autonomy going into situations. So it's brilliant. Like, at the end of it, what we're going to do is just apply it, because it's great having theoretical knowledge of the emotional system, having theoretical knowledge of the physiological system, but how do we apply that to be able to actually look at our limiting behaviors? How do we identify obstacles? How do we shape new behaviors? And how do we create the environment for sustainable change? That's what we'll be looking at in the fourth week of this. So today is an introduction. Today is a kind of introduction to where we'll be going over the next few weeks. Very excited to be able to deep dive a little bit. If you guys have any comments that you'd like to drop into the comment section for today, do. If there's anything you'd like me to touch on in the following few weeks. Drop an old comment into the text box, and I'll do my best to incorporate it so that you have some amount of leveraging in or some amount of creative input into how the next few weeks worth of talks are going. So if there's anything in particular you'd like me to touch on around beliefs, around creating habits, habit formation, emotional pathways, cognitive pathways, please do feel free to drop a comment in the comment box. Or if there's anything that you would like to contribute, I'd be delighted to hear all about it. Otherwise, that's the bus stop tour of what are beliefs. Essentially, it's something we all agree on, or we agree on within ourselves, whether we have evidence or not. And I think the task and the object of the exercise is to really curate the type of beliefs that we let into our lives and that we feed, to be able to have the behaviors attached to it come to fruition with a degree of authorship. So that's me for today. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll be back next week with a look at the emotional pathways and how those influence our behaviors, and how our behaviors actually and beliefs conversely influence our emotions. So thanks a million for tuning in. I don't think there's any comments coming in for today, and that's totally okay. And I'll be chatting to you next week. Mind yourselves and have a lovely end of your day and weekend. Bye now.